Okay, shalom everyone. Welcome back to Parsha Insights, and we're going to be looking at Parasha Lecha through the eyes of Rav Moshe Shapiro, who has proven to be a very insightful commentator, and I personally have been very enthused by his teachings. And I really could have in this week I was very excited by what he had to say, and there were a number of different avenues. On every Parsha, we have access to probably about 6 or 7 different essays that he wrote over time, and there were some extraordinary pieces. And one had to do with Abraham. We're introduced to Avraham, but Avraham as the paragon of kindness. So we're going to take a look at that together, of what Avraham's kindness actually meant, and I think it's a very insightful piece. So here we go. Parashat Lech Lecha. Okay, we're starting with the Gemara in Ketuvot. The Gemara in Ketuvot says, Rabbi Chia bar Abba was the Bible teacher. We'll read it in the Aramaic. We're going to jump right into the story in which we're showing not Avraham in action, but how we're using Avraham in our tradition, or what he represents for us. And then we'll go back to Avraham in action in our parsha. Ki had Rabbi Chia bar Abba makre b'nei de Reish Lakish hava. Rabbi Chia bar Abba was the teacher of the children of Reish Lakish, the son of Reish Lakish. So the difference between a makre and a matneh has to do with difference between teaching the written law versus the oral law. Matneh from the Hebrew word matnitin, which means Mishnah, and makre referring to Torah. So it could be that he was the Torah teacher, the Bible teacher. It could be that he was the oral law teacher. Shchiv le yanuka. So this Rabbi Chia bar Abba experienced a tragedy and his child died. And then it's talking about Reish Lakish, right, whose children are being cared for by this man, or being taught by this man. Reish Lakish would visit the Shiva, and it says he didn't go the first day, but he came the next day. We'll jump over the English, and he took Yehuda bar Nachmani, his disseminator, who would assist him in the teachings, and they went to comfort him. And basically, the Talmud then has a whole series of places where Reish Lakish would say to his disseminator, say this now, give this teaching, tell this, and the teacher would say it over. It was very, very beautiful. So Reish Lakish said to the disseminator at a certain point, he said, stand and say a statement with regard to those who comfort the mourners. Give me something about menachme avelim. Give me a dvar Torah about menachme avelim. Patach va'amar, so he said, achenu gomlei chasadim, b'nei gomlei chasadim, our brothers, bestowers of loving kindness, sons of bestowers of loving kindness, who embrace the covenant of Abraham, our patriarch, as it is stated, for I know him, that he will command his children to do righteousness and justice. Our brothers, Achenu Baal Gemul, may the master of reward, Yeshalem lachem gemulchem, repay your reward. Baruch atah mishalem hagmul. Blessed are you, God, who pays rewards, who pays the just deserts, who pays rewards. So we see the word here, gemul. Gemul is a word for reward, but it's also used within the context of gomlei chasadim, of the word chesed, of kindness, to pay, to give forward acts of kindness. Hamachazikim Bivrito shel Avraham Avinu, those who embrace the covenant of Abraham. So what's the covenant of Abraham? What are we talking about here? Forget everything you know. Forget the concept of bris. From this context, what is the covenant of Abraham? The covenant of Abraham is a covenant of kindness. That's the covenant of Abraham. That's it.
I thought the covenant of Abraham was we should be as numerous as the sands and the stars.
That's one covenant of Abraham. There's another covenant of Abraham, which Jewish males experience at 8 days old or upon conversion. That's another covenant of Abraham. There are many covenants, but the covenant we're referring to here is a covenant of chesed. So what is this covenant of chesed? So Rashi says, what is the covenant of Abraham, right? Because clearly when you say bris and you say Abraham, you think of one thing. You think of the milah, of the circumcision. And that's clearly not what it's talking about here. So that's where Rashi comes in and says, what are we talking about? The covenant of Abraham? Shegamal chasadim, that Abraham performed acts of kindness, as it says, Vayita Eshel, that Abraham planted an Eshel. We understand that to be a type of tree. And our sages teach the word Eshel. This tree is actually Rashi Tevot, is actually, the letters are an acronym. The letters stand for Achila, eating, Shtia, drinking, Livia, which is escorting or bringing them from one place to another. That's a part of the covenant. There are other versions which say that the lamed is lina, which means from the Hebrew word malon, which is a hotel, lodging. So eating, drinking, lodging, or eating, drinking, escorting. The first letters of these three words spell the word eshel from the verse, and that is Abraham performing acts of kindness by giving to other people. Okay, here's the verse. Vayita eshel be'Beersheva. The Abraham established a tamarisk tree in Beersheva. Vayikra Beersheva, vayikra sham b'shem Adonai Elo Olam, and he invoked there the name of God, the everlasting God. Okay, that's your verse from our Parasha. That's your verse from Genesis. This is the source of kindness. Abraham is giving food. He's giving drink. He's providing all these services for people who pass through his town. It's very beautiful. It's very giving. That's the covenant of Abraham. And Rashi on that verse. So again, we saw Rashi on the Talmud, which talked about the covenant as part of the comforting mourners. And Rashi on that verse says the following. Rashi says, Al Yedei Oto Eshel, through this Eshel, through this tamarisk, the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, was called God of the entire universe. Abraham brought God into the world. For after they had eaten and drunk, he said to them, bless him of whose possessions you have eaten. Do you think that you have eaten of what is mine? You have eaten of that which belongs to him who spake, and the universe came into existence. Abraham's kindness, there's something special happening here. Abraham's kindness, when he would give, he would use it as an opportunity to teach. He would use it as an opportunity to tell people about God. Bless God. You think it's me you're thanking? Or you think because I cooked a nice meal, it's worth it? No. Bless God who has provided everything for us. Comes Rav Moshe Shapiro. And he asks, as he always comes in and asks us a fascinating question. He says, apparently the beneficence of Avraham Avinu is not self-understood. The Talmud calls kindness the covenant of Avraham Avinu. That was the Talmud in Ketubot, a phrase we use by the circumcision of a child, right? When a child at the circumcision, the father says the blessing, Asher Kishanu Mitzvatav Tzivanu, God, you have commanded us with the commandment, Lachniso Bivrito Shel Avraham Avinu, to enter this child into the covenant of our forefather Abraham. And there we're talking about the covenant of Milah, of circumcision, but that same phrase, the Brit Avraham Avinu, the covenant of Abraham, is used in the Talmud to refer to kindness. In other words, a covenant was forged with Avraham Avinu on his trait of kindness. His beneficence was not as one who performs an act of kindness, but as the fulfillment of a covenant. There's something more happening here. Abraham is not just a man of kindness. He is a partner in a covenant of kindness. And what does that look like? What exactly does that mean? That's what we're going to be exploring a little bit in the next minutes together. Question, comment before we move on? Okay.
I might have a question, Rabbi.
Please.
The word covenant, the word brit also means kind of contract, right? In a sense.
Yeah, a brit.
Covenant?
A covenant. I don't know about modern Hebrew. A choseh would be a contract, I suppose. I'm trying to think. You're anticipating the very next source, which is going to talk about an etymology of covenant. And I did not send these sources out in advance, but I believe the link is in the chat. But in any event, it's there's more to the word. And Nachmanides says, by the way, al derech haemet, by the way of truth, the brit, brit, the word brit is similar to briati, my creation. V'hinei brit kamo briati. Meaning the word covenant, what Nachmanides says is that the word covenant and the word creation are connected. So Abraham, in entering this covenant of kindness, is actually creating something within the concept of kindness. Don't think that before Abraham, kindness didn't exist. It's that Abraham brought in a new approach to kindness. That was his covenant. That was his creation. Brit, it never occurred to me before seeing this Nachmanides that these two words, two such similar words, Brit and bara, right? Bereshit, bara, God created, but that there is a deep similarity. So Rav Moshe Shapiro says, what's the meaning of the covenant? People love to perform acts of kindness. People are beneficent by nature, but for some reason, the beneficence of Avraham Avinu was a new creation, different from any act of kindness done in the world. His kindness was unique. Upon it, a covenant was forged. Okay, so now let's try to understand the covenant of Avraham. So part of understanding that is just trying to nail down who was Avraham. So Rav Moshe Shapiro offers these two very interesting sources. So number one, the verse in Micha. What do we know about Avraham? Who is Avraham to us? Titen emet liYaakov. Jacob is about emet, is about truth. Chesed l'Avraham. We know this, right? This is what we've been talking about. Kindness is Abraham. That's it. Chesed l'Avraham. That's what we're talking about. On the other hand, there's something else that Abraham is known for. And the Rambam says this in a number of places, Maimonides and Mishnah Torah, in Hilchot Avodah Zarah. He tells the whole story about Abraham. He says, when Abraham was weaned, Kevan shenigmal eitan zeh. It's a beautiful phrase. When this eitan, the Hebrew word eitan is strength, is might. When this mighty man was weaned, hitchil l'shotet b'dato, he began to waver a little bit. He began to rethink things. Ad shehisig derech haemet, until his intellectual wanderings brought him to truth. Vehevin kav hatzedek, and he understood the path of righteousness. V'itchil amod v'likro bekol gadol l'chol ha'olam, and he stood up and he read and he declared in his great voice for the entire world, l'hodiam sheyesh sham Eloha, and to let them know that there is a God in this world, echad, that there's one God, l'chol ha'olam, for the entire world, v'lo ra'ui la'avod, and that God is worthy to serve. And so Abraham, on the one hand, is kindness, and on the other hand is what? Abraham is faith. Kindness, if we could ascribe two attributes to Abraham, he is a man of kindness and he is a man of faith, and both of those are really important parts of Abraham and what he stands for us. And he's the model for us of both. He's the one who discovered God. He's a man of faith. He is the one who took care of others. He's a man of kindness. And Rav Moshe Shapiro points out, look at this verse in Isaiah. Habitu el Avraham avichem. Look at your forefather Abraham. Vel Sarah techol elchem. And to Sarah who brought you forth, who's your matriarch. Ki echad karativ. For I called him Echad, one. So Rav Moshe Shapiro said, look at Abraham. Is he faith or is he kindness? Which is he? But God is calling him one. So there must be some way in which this faith and kindness are coming together to form one identity, to form one singular identity. Rav Moshe Shapiro says the heightened level of Avraham Avinu was that he was one person. How then can we ascribe to him two differing traits? So that's our question. That's how we're moving forward. How can Abraham be two and one at the same time? He says here, there's actually a beautiful insight about what it means to be one. And he uses the phrases in Hebrew, and we'll look at it in a moment, of what we call a child and what we call an adult. But note that we also use those phrases to describe people in terms of their spiritual stature, greatness and smallness. Katan, a person who is a katan, if you say somebody has a rosh katan means small-minded, but somebody who's a katan, right? It means that they are either a minor, literally, they're under a certain age, or that they're small in terms of their spiritual stature, their character. Somebody can be a gadol. That person's a gadol. It could refer to age. It could refer they're above the age of bat or bar mitzvah, or it could refer to who they are as a person. And he said these words are more than descriptive terms. Listen, it's amazing. I love this language play that he uses. He says the word katan, a minor or small, derives from the Hebrew word katua, which means fragmented. Every moment of the day, he is someone else. Someone who is small is scattered. Nothing unites him into a single person. And therefore, he is fragmented, dispersed, and scattered. He does not proceed as one, but always leaves parts of himself in one place and parts in another place. That's a small person. But a great person, a gadol, a great, from the Hebrew word gada, which means riverbank, the path upon which the river flows and continues its course. You want to trace the course of a winding river, follow the bank of the river. Likewise, the status of gadol, of adulthood, of greatness, applies to one whose every moment is a continuation of the previous and whose entire personality joins into a unified whole. That's gadlut. That's greatness, is the ability to be many things, but all of them are connected like a winding river. All of them form one personality, one human being. There's a consistency. Even if we all have different parts of our being and parts of our soul and parts of our character, a gadol is one for whom you can trace the path of connection between the different parts of one's character. Most people, he says, most people today are small and dispersed. They have no running thread through their life. They have so many different aspects of their personality. Avraham Avinu is the ultimate unified man, the true image of man, all of whose various parts join to a single course. Okay, so let's take a step back for a moment. There are some people who have just connected now, and I think we'll just I know people are having difficulty with the Zoom and with the link, so we are delighted that you're here. We are, of course, recording it, and we'll send out the link in just a moment, or after a few moments after the class continues, we'll send out the link. But just to review for a moment, we're talking about Abraham being the paragon of kindness, and it seems to be that there's a unique attribute of kindness within how we talk about Abraham. There's a covenant of kindness, meaning, as Rav Moshe Shapiro says, there has to be something unique about his kindness. What is he creating with his kindness? What's different about Abraham's kindness? And we spoke about Abraham having multiple sides to his legend. He is, number one, the person of kindness who gives and gives and gives. And on the other hand, he is the man of faith who discovers God and brings that faith throughout the world. And now he's saying that actually those two attributes of kindness and faith come together to form one consistent person. That's who Abraham is. And to understand Abraham's perspective and how it fits into his faith, Abraham's kindness, that's basically where we're going. We're talking about a kindness. Abraham's innovation is going to be a kindness that's informed by faith. And what that looks like is to understand this fascinating Mishnah in Tractate Sanhedrin, talking about how the courts would operate, in particular in capital cases, how the courts would operate. So how does the court intimidate the witnesses? Meaning, how do they, maybe intimidate's not the right word, how do they impose upon the witnesses the significance of what they're about to do, the gravity of their task in a capital case? They would bring the witnesses in and say to them, well, perhaps what you say in your testimony is based on conjecture, or maybe based on a rumor, or maybe based on hearsay, or maybe it's based on the statement of a trusted person. Maybe you don't know that ultimately we examine you with inquiry and interrogation. They're trying to make sure that these witnesses are giving a true and honest and firsthand testimony. Maybe you don't know, perhaps you don't know. maybe you don't know that we're going to examine you, we're going to inquire, we're going to do an interrogation. Don't think that you could just come up here and just say what you think, or say an opinion, or make things up or lie. No, that we're going to get down to the truth. And the court tells them, and you should know that the cases of capital law are not like cases of monetary law. In cases of monetary law, a person who testifies falsely, well, what happens? You can give money to the proper owner. There's restitution. There's repentance. In a monetary case, you can make it right. Even if you pervert justice, you can always make it right at the end by making sure that the money gets from the wrong person to the right person. But in the case of capital law, if one testifies falsely, the blood of the accused and the blood of his offspring, damo v'dam zarotav, his blood and the blood of his offspring you're responsible, are ascribed to the witness's testimony until eternity. And then it goes on and talks about how we know this, and it gives an example from Cain and Abel, and how we know that the blood, where it says your brother's blood is calling out to you from the earth, right? We know how serious this is, what it means to lie in a capital case. And the court says also to emphasize the importance of this testimony and the sanctity of human life. The court says, Adam Yechidi, Nivra Adam Yechidi, man was created alone. One man. There was a point in time in the Torah's description in which there was one human being in the world. Why? Why couldn't God have, we that differs from the creation of every other being. We don't imagine that at one point there was only one elephant in the world. We think God created the elephants, created lots of them, created hundreds, thousands of them, millions, I don't know how many elephants, dinosaurs, whatever it is, whatever you want to say. God created a species at a time, not an individual at a time. Man was the only species that was created starting with an individual. Why? The Mishnah says, this is a great question, and the Mishnah says, to teach you the power of an individual, to teach you how significant every individual is, to teach you, and this, I imagine this teaching will be very familiar to you, that anyone who destroys one soul has destroyed an entire world, and anyone who sustains one soul has sustained the entire world. Familiar with that teaching? So that is the teaching. This is the context of that teaching from the Mishnah and Tractate Sanhedrin, that every human life and the perspective of the Tractate Sanhedrin, every Jewish life is worth an entire world. That's the significance. What do we do with this? Therefore, and I forgot to edit that out. So therefore, since all humanity descends from one person, each and every person is obligated to say, the world was created for me. The world was created for me. This is we could spend quite a while on this teaching alone. But from a theological perspective, this is where Abraham is. Abraham has come to the understanding that God created the world, that one God created the world, right? There's a midrash where he sees this great building that's burning, that's on fire, and he realizes he has this whole revelation about the world and how the world is on fire. And just as you can't have a building without an owner, so too you can't have a world without God who created it. So we're understanding that Abraham is now seeing the world in a different way. God is the creator. God created one person to begin the world. God has an individual relationship with each person. That's my faith, Abraham says. And to go back to the Talmud, to go back to Rashi, Rashi says, Bishvili nivra olam, the world was created to me. Klomar, as if to say, Chashuv ani ka'olam maleh. I am as important, I am so important as an entire world. Every person is an entire world. That's the equation. That's the logical extension that we're going to. That the world was created for me, for an individual. Therefore, I am the entire world. And by the way, that means that you too are an entire world. If God created one individual, every individual has the status of being worthy, of being measured against the entire world. The world is sustained for each and every one of us at the same time, because that's the power of an individual. That's what the Torah is telling us. Rav Moshe Shapiro, the creation of but a single man places the responsibility entirely on his shoulders, and it remains so even after the creation of others. Meaning, don't think this was just the case for the first man, but even many people, billions of people coexist in this world. The designation of each individual as a full world means that each person grasps the entirety of creation in a manner uniquely his own and understands the world differently from anyone else. Meaning, we each have our own worlds. We each have our own perspective of the world, and that perspective is equally substantial and significant to mean that the world was created for each of us. What is revealed to him, to each of us, what's revealed to you is not revealed to me. I don't have your perspective. I don't see the world through your eyes. What he comprehends is his alone. What happens in your head, I will never have full access. No matter how hard you try to share, I will never see exactly what you see. I will never experience exactly what you experience. I will never think exactly what you think. Your world is your world. Consequently, all that he reveals of the glory of heaven, no one else can reveal. Only he can reveal the true form of the world according to his perception. Everyone has the possibility to bring forward the world that they see, the glory of heaven in the way that they see it. So now, as we're reaching the end of this journey, or where this journey comes together, so if Abraham's faith is based on the power of the individual to perceive God, to experience God, God created one individual to teach us this. So how does this have anything to do with kindness? So in our Parasha as well, we see this remarkable verse that Abraham, talking about Abraham, Vehemin baronai ve'achshavel lo tzedakah, that Abraham believed in God, and he, presumably means God considered it as a charity or as a merit, meaning there was something about Abraham at this point in his life, his belief, which was particularly praiseworthy. And the question that's asked is, at this point in Abraham's life, we're picking up this story very late in his life. He's in his 90s, right? This is not a young man, a young Abraham that we're talking about. So he puts his trust in God. So how is suddenly here his faith different? Why is suddenly now is it charitable? And to go back, at this late stage of your life, what was the faith that Abraham achieved? Hadn't he been a man of faith since he was a young child? Just to quote the Midrash says, God says, Ekev asher shama Avraham bekoli, because Abraham hearkened to my voice. Rabbi Yochanan, so what is it? When did Abraham hearken to my voice? Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina, they both say, Ben arba'im u'shmana shana hikir Avram et baro, that Abraham was 48 years old when he recognized God. Reish Lakish amar, Ben shalosh shanim hikir Avraham et baro. He was 3 years old when he first recognized God. It's a big difference between 48 and 3 years old. Right? Where are they coming from? So there's a comment of the Eitz Yosef, who says, how do we know? Look at this verse. One important thing to look at is this verse Akev. It says Akev, the Hebrew word because, Akev. So the verse says, so the Eitz Yosef explaining this, how do we get to these numbers 48 and 3? He says, how do we get to Akev? So I'll tell you outside what he says. Akev has a numerical value. What's the numerical value? Ayin is 70, Kuf is 100, and Bet is 2. So 172. So that's what we need to know. He says, Sheshnotav shel Avraham, Abraham lived to be 175. Kevan de Ben Gimel Hikir, so if he was 3 when he recognized God, that means he lived 172 years with faith. First 3 were a wash. Those who didn't have it. But that's the implication. That's where the Midrash is saying, why the Midrash is saying. And I'll say, I think we might all struggle. I've known 3-year-olds in my life. They're not people of great faith. They're maybe trusting, but not in terms of faith in the Almighty. It's a difficult thing to achieve at the age of 3, and perhaps it's Midrash, and so perhaps we can understand. We spent a year studying Midrash. We can understand that Midrash is meant to give us ideas and challenge us in many ways, but not always to be taken literally. And when Reish Lakish says he was 3 years old, either we imagine Abraham as this very unrelatable, superhuman 3-year-old with a deep spirituality and complex philosophical understandings, or we say the Midrash is trying to tell us that Abraham was a young man when he started to believe, and that's it, and not read too much into it. Why 48? Because that's how old he was in the Dor Haflaga, what we talked about last week, the generation of the rift, the generation of the Tower of Babel. That was how old he was, and velo nishtatef imahem, and he didn't join them. So therefore, it must be that was the age in which his faith began, because otherwise he would have been caught up with them, and we would never have heard of Abraham. So knowing that he was able to resist the generational pull towards whatever they were trying to do, as we discussed last week, and in the generation of the Tower of Babel, we discussed three different possibilities connected to 3 different understandings of language. So whatever they were trying to do, that was Abraham. Abraham resisted being drawn into that. So knowing the whole point, knowing that Abraham started to believe in God in a young age, now 90-something years later, suddenly he has belief and God considers it a merit for him. But he's been believing his whole life, at the very least 50-something years, and at the very most 90-something years. Either way you take it, Abraham is not new to the faith game. So why suddenly here is there something unique and significant? Rav Moshe Shapiro, he revealed in the clearest possible manner that he created the world for the one solitary human being. He revealed, this is what Abraham at this point in his life suddenly revealed, not only that there was one God, but Abraham revealed something about humanity. He revealed that God created the world for the individual. He revealed that his connection to the world is a full connection with every single individual. We're not just an army serving God. We are individuals serving God. The Creator revealed the ability for every single person to become the ultimate image of man. It's a very powerful idea. God's connection, direct connection with each individual, being the ultimate fulfillment of creation. Susan.
But you keep saying man. What about what happened to women?
Excellent point, and I appreciate you're saying that. You can't hear the capital M that I'm using. I mean mankind.
Mankind.
I have to correct that ingrained habit.
Okay, to include all of humans.
I very much appreciate your saying that. Thank you. Thank you.
So I have another comment, Rabbi, if this is the time.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I accept the notion and believe that we each are in, our world is an all-encompassing, and the whole world is in each of us.
Right.
And so what occurs to me all of the time is this kind of, when we're learning this kind of stuff, it only applies to the smallest sliver of mankind who are privileged, as we are, to live in this kind of a society. And when I look at most of the world, and even when we talk about the history of our Israel, we say, well, the Jewish people continued. Oh, that's great, isn't it? Well, what about all the people who died on the way? And I'm not only talking about the Holocaust, I'm talking about the Hakamat Hamadinah.
Right.
You know, there were some young people. It was incredibly difficult when they were fighting for Israel. And that individual, he is his own world, and he's gone, and everything is gone. So I do believe in that the whole world is centered on each individual. But I have a lot of trouble because it works for me, but it doesn't work for most people in the world, and hasn't worked for most people in the world throughout history. That's my problem.
I appreciate your saying that. I think many of us struggle with anytime we have some type of collective celebration or collective achievement, and it seems as if you have to almost step over the bodies, step over the fallen, and ignore the sacrifices, and understand that as you celebrate Hakamat Medina, right? You celebrate the state of Israel, that families' lives were lost, and individuals and entire worlds were destroyed to get to that point.
That's right. We're the
and
beneficiaries. And on a simpler, much simpler and less dramatic note, the first time I lived away from my home was when I went to the University of Michigan graduate school. And I suddenly realized there that all of our Judaism and our practices are based on family units. I was there alone in a dorm, and I realized that most of the rituals and everything didn't apply to me. I happened to be there for Pesach, so I hooked up with it was a girl dorm, and I ran the Seder for them, so there I was in a kehillah or a mishpacha or whatever, but our whole religion is based on an ideal state, let's say, of human existence and civilization.
Right.
And Rabbi, I'm sorry to bring this up, but it has very much to do with what he's talking about, what you're talking about. There's a very big problem in Montreal right now for the Jewish students at the CJEPs and the universities, particularly McGill and Concordia. There's a lawsuit ongoing at McGill. The Jews have been ostracized. There's a newspaper at Concordia that Concordia is funding that has anti-Semitic information in it, and we Jews are being bashed again. And God created a world which ultimately should be good for everybody, and there's so much evil in it. It's like devastating.
Right. I think these are great points. I'm going to share. There's an Aramaic phrase that is often used in the yeshiva world, and the phrase is a 3-word phrase, in hachinami. It's said usually fast, in hachinami, and it means basically, I concede your points, but I stick with my thesis. And it means that
Hopefully.
Yes, absolutely, you are right. I don't have a way to integrate that into this particular conversation right now. Your points are on point and are brilliant and are correct. And at the same time, I will say that that Rav Moshe Shapiro's approach to emphasizing the faith of Abraham is based in the power of the individuality, and that each person is an individual world, and that means that my world, if I am the entire world, then my world is implicated, and you are implicated in my world. I am implicated in your world, because each of us is an entire world. There's this interconnection and individuality that's taking place at the same time. And even with that understanding, yes, there are worlds that are destroyed, and there are worlds that are built, and there's communal success, and there's still individual disasters and individual successes within communal disasters. Think about how good life was for many years for the oligarchs as the society is falling down around them. Would you say as a society that's a successful society? No. As an individual, were they successful individuals sitting on their, for the time being, temporarily at least? Yeah, sitting on their yachts in the Mediterranean. Yeah, their life was pretty good. Absolutely. So I think that there's a way to balance this and say, in hachinami, thank you for those points. They are correct. I agree. And I'm sticking with the thesis that Rav Moshe Shapiro says that Avram Avinu, that his faith is based on the power of the individual and God's individual connection with each and every one of us. And to go back to kindness now, to bring it together to the concept of kindness. There's a verse in Mishle, going back to Proverbs, Tzedakah teromem goy, righteousness exalts a nation, v'chesed le'umim chatat. Very strange phrase. Chesed, kindness, le'umim, for the nations, is a sin. Wait, there's a negative form of kindness? There's something bad within kindness? How could that possibly be? Isn't kindness the epitome of good? So Rav Moshe Shapiro, in conclusion, says, when it comes to Abraham's kindness, we have no portrayal of his kindness. We don't understand what Abraham was when he was kind. We have no conception of kindness altogether. Our concept of kindness is to do good to others, which usually generates an elated feeling in the doer. We feel good about that. People love to perform acts of kindness because it benefits them as well. And not to say that there's no such thing as altruism. Not to say that people can't be pure givers, but in general, the form of kindness that's practiced is a kindness that brings joy, that brings happiness to the one who's performing it, who's helping. But there's a different perspective entirely on kindness. And that's the perspective of Abraham, which is kindness out of faith, and faith in the power of the individual to contain an entire world. The kindness of Avraham Avinu was the responsibility he had to every detail of creation. Every person in the world is part of him, and every person is therefore his responsibility. He needed to provide them with food because he needed to sustain the image of man. Right? They're powerful words, powerful sentences. These last two sentences. Every person in the world is part of Abraham because he's the entire world, and every person is an entire world, and every person is therefore his responsibility. If the world was created for me, if I am really worthy as an individual human, because humanity is made for the individual, if I am worthy of having this entire world on my shoulders, then you are my responsibility as part of this world. And he needed to provide them with food because he needed to sustain the image of mankind. Let's in our minds, we change that to a capital M, mankind, the image of humanity needed to be sustained by Abraham. So it's a complex thought, but one I believe that's very illuminating. To go back to the beginning, to go back to how we started, and the link to this source sheet is in the chat. To go back to where we started, Abraham was the man of kindness, but in his kindness there's a covenant. A covenant implies something unique, as we showed. Nachmanides said the word covenant comes from the word creation. When there's a covenant, something new is being created. What did Abraham create? Abraham was a man of kindness. Abraham was a man of faith. Abraham was a man of oneness, as God calls him, Echad Karativ. I called him one. We spoke about the interesting linguistic concepts of Katan and Gadol, and how somebody who is truly great has this sense of consistency that combines their attributes, that connects their attributes, like the riverbank flowing from one place to another. Abraham flowing from faith to kindness. There's something that's connecting them. What is it? And Rav Moshe Shapiro's approach, it's the power of the individual, God's connection with the individual, God's creation of humanity, beginning with an individual, shows us that each person is worthy of sustaining an entire world. Every person has to say that about themselves. And if I say that about myself, then my acts of kindness are actually acts that are performed in the service of sustaining the world and sustaining the image of mankind within that world, which is my image, because it is my world. That's what Abraham taught as a way of combining faith and kindness. It's not kindness just to do good. It's not kindness just to help you because you're in need. That's not what it is. And it's not kindness, obviously, to make me feel good about myself for doing acts of kindness. It's existential kindness. It's kindness that is there to keep the world going, because I need to look after you because you're part of my world. It's a powerful expression of faith and the connection of faith and kindness in the work of Rav Moshe Shapiro. Any questions on that?
Well,
Very light and
I'll take I'll take this concept into the world of economics. We say now that capitalism is a better system than socialism because in every individual striving for his own betterment benefits society. However, in socialism, when you're supposed to look out for the whole system, it does not produce as good a result. And so that concept, which we have adopted in our day and age, the economic system goes contrary, Rabbi, to the principle which you just enunciated.
Why does it go contrary? Can you articulate that? Because I heard parts of those principles.
Because kindness,
yeah.
If I do kindness because it makes me feel better, I'm going to do a lot more kindness than in fact, I'm going to be more motivated than if I'm doing kindness to better the world.
So you'll please correct me, because you saw the words of Rav Moshe Shapiro just as I did. But my understanding is that your description of capitalism would be similar to his description of kindness, which is Abraham understood that faith is an individual act, and therefore kindness to others is in service of oneself. So I need to serve my world. I need to sustain my world, which is my creation of God. God has given me this world. It's an extraordinary power. I have to say, the Mishnah says, every person has to say the world was created for me. But in pursuit of bettering this world, I, at the same time, as a wonderful byproduct, have to look out for you. So it really is a self-centered, and not in a pejorative way, but just in a descriptive way, a self-centered approach to faith that ultimately benefits all of society.
I guess maybe I put the accent on the wrong syllable.
But I love that. I love that analogy. I love bringing it into the world of economics. I thought that I have to think that through, of the difference between socialism and communism, and maybe we can bring it into politics also, and talk about living in a democracy, in particular in election season right now. It's fascinating.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, isn't there a danger if you're saying that the world was created for me, and yes, that ultimately the whole world benefits, there's that existential kindness that it keeps the world going. However, the way human beings are, then the average human being gets caught up in himself. So how do you stop him from getting a swelled head and being...
Yes. I wish I had props with me, because I actually do own 2 coins, which I'm gonna just look next to me. I don't think they're here with me. I think I know where they are. I own 2 coins, and they're a replica of coins that were owned by the great Hasidic master, Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa.
Yeah.
And they say that he would hold 2 coins in one in each pocket. On one would be written the words of Mishnah and Sanhedrin, which we saw, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for me. On the other, he would say the words, Anochi afar va'efer, I am but dust and ashes.
Dust and ashes,
And
yeah.
And
That's the
so
balance.
that's exactly. So what you're talking about, yeah, you're right. There are people who read those words bishvili nivra olam, and they take it to the extent that they become insufferable egomaniacs. You're right. There is a danger. There is a danger of that. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
One last comment, and then we have to sign off in a moment. Go ahead.
Okay, a last comment. It seems to me that Soloveitchik's Lonely Man of Faith might be a complementary text to read with Moshe's, the one that you're describing now.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. When we develop this into a series, you'll remind me of that comment, and yeah, that there a lot can be said about that. Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna sign off now because we do have to go. It is time. And thank you all. Reminder: next week I will not be teaching. Rabbi Mark Fishman, our director of adult learning at the Shar, will be teaching not half a class but the entire class. And it'll be, I believe, the same channel, but look out for an email again next Thursday morning, and then I'll see you the week after that, in Yirtzeh Hashem. And until then, have a wonderful Shabbat, and wishing everyone well. Shabbat Shalom.
Well,